Hi. Sorry.
Hey, man. All right, now go ahead.
Okay. Everything rolling good? Yeah, there we are. All right. Well, my name's Daniel, and I'm going to turn my volume down. So there we go. My name is Daniel Gilfix. I am a consciousness engineer and psychic athlete, and I am going to be at the Center for Christ Consciousness this Sunday. We're doing a Psychic Sunday deal, and this gave me the opportunity to appear on this podcast, which I'm very grateful for. I'm going to tell you about myself, and I'm going to tell you about my journey and how I got to this place, and what I'm doing here, and what I also, and I'm also going to talk about what I think might be happening, and where we as a species might be heading, and talking about some strategies to kind of, help us through this time, get healthy, get happy, get whole. And because we have a real opportunity for that now. So I'll just start with my story. I was born in a fairly standard, fairly conservative environment. Nothing really special about it, but I had a hard time with it because I was very sensitive, and was picking up a lot on the people around me and what they had going on. And a lot of unhappiness, really feeling into the dissatisfaction and the absence of vitality that a lot of people seem to be living with. And I thought that was just what life was. And I thought that that's what my future was too, that I was going to be working a job I didn't like, maybe for some good money, because I knew people, I grew up not wealthy, but with means. And I thought that, that was going to be what I was going to do. And that thought filled me with such dread. And as a result, I was pretty depressed for quite a long time. I was also incredibly shy and self-conscious and huge. Like, I was such a big kid. It was a really strange combination of things. And then that was just kind of what my life was until I was in my late teens, 18, 19. And then things started to open up, and I started to experiment with psychedelics. And the psychedelics, the experience on them showed me that what I was perceiving was actually a real thing, and that there might be something for me to explore. And so I started my exploration very tentatively, excuse me, at first. My entrance into it outside of the psychedelics was actually through fitness. I started to work out a lot, and in the course of that, I tore my rotator cuff a couple of times, and the first time it took 6 months before I could work out again, and then the second time that I did that, I was like not prepared to take that much time off. So a friend of mine told me about Udo's oil. And Udo's oil it's a blend of essential fatty acids. And this was in this was in the late 90s. So this wasn't all that well known. It was still kind of fringy. So I took the Udo's oil, and my rotator cuff injury healed in 3 weeks rather than 6 months. So I was like, wow, I mean, what else can I do? Really primarily focused on physical performance. I stopped drinking alcohol because it affected my ability to have a workout the next day. I stopped drinking milk and dairy because I wanted to get lean. What I found was, as I started removing these things from my diet, that it wasn't only that my body changed, but the way that I thought about things changed. And my consciousness essentially shifted through the food that I was eating. And I thought that was pretty cool. So I started experimenting with that. And I went through my 20s, a lot of experimentation with supplements and herbs and homeopathics and dietary strategies. And I learned a lot about how a body works and how, this body in particular, how it responds to different herbs and supplements and foods. And I ended up taking a training in nutrition, human anatomy and physiology, herbal medicine, all that stuff. And slowly but surely there was just this broader truth that was opening to me. And I felt like I was just going to, work in that area. I was going to, be a nutritionist and talk about, teach people about supplements and about, physical performance. I was very much into yoga. I thought I might do a teacher training in that. And that was the path that my life was on. And I was pretty happy about it, actually. And then when I was 27, I got hit by a car. And I was biking to my job at a health food store where I was hawking supplements. And I was biking down this highway. I lived outside of town. It was about a 10-mile bike in. And a guy turned left, and he didn't see me. He wasn't looking for someone on a bike. He was looking for cars and holes in the traffic, and he turned left and drove right into me. And what was really life-changing about that experience, outside of getting hit by a car, which is life-changing, was that as I left the house that morning, I had this conversation going in my head. This guy that I worked with at this other health food store in a different city where I lived before, he was a professional cyclist, and he told me that he'd been hit by a car at least 2 or 3 times, and he told me that if you can see the car coming and you can lean into it, then it transfers some of your weight back into the car, and you won't fly. You won't fly off it, right? So I had that conversation playing in my head that morning, quite, at the time, kind of quite randomly. And but as soon as I heard that, I saw the car turn left, and I was able to put my hand on it and put my weight back into the car. And as a result, I didn't really get hurt all that bad. I did, but I didn't break anything. Got some stitches, had a concussion, but nothing that altered my life in any way. What did change after that experience, though, was that I no longer wanted to focus primarily on nutrients, whether they're nutrients from supplements, which are isolated synthetics and not always the best thing to be taking, quite honestly, or from herbs or homeopathics. I was still into all that, and food. I was plant-based at that time, really into the vegan lifestyle. That was another thing that changed, actually. After the car hit me, like almost immediately, like a couple of days later, I started craving meat for the first time in 6 or 7 years. Like my body was just asking for it. And so I actually had my first, a friend of mine hunted, and he gave me some venison. So my first foray back into that world was through some wild game, which was actually very preferable. But I didn't want to pursue my education in that field anymore, and I felt like I was just done. And I felt like I knew enough. I knew as much as I was going to know about it, and it was helpful. My awareness of different supplements and herbs and how to use them, how to make them into medicines, really helped me heal and helped my skin heal. I had a lot of road rash, and it all healed up, without any scarring, which is pretty cool. But I didn't know what I was going to do. I thought I was on this path, and then, literally, like, universe came down and gave me a very hard course correction and said, it's not what you're here for. Shortly after that, I was off work for 6 weeks, and then I came back, and this woman who I'd met before, she had come in, and she asked me where I'd been, and so I told her what happened, and I didn't know anything about her, really. I knew she did some kind of energy work, but I'd never really been exposed to that before. So she asked me what happened, and I told her about, getting hit by this car. And most people who I spoke to, when I told them that, their response was, concern and like, oh, that's awful. She was just interested. She was just like, well, tell me, where are your injuries? And so I told her, I got hit on the left side, and she said, well, that's your feminine side. Tell me about the relationship you have with women, with your mother. What areas of your left side? And it was like my knee that took the sort of largest impact. She said, well, the knees are about, willpower and determination, and I've been using a lot, like I was living a very willful life, and doing the plant-based thing, not driving on purpose, right? Biked everywhere. Really focused on doing the right thing. Not that it was the wrong thing, but I was using a lot of energy. My life was difficult, and I did that on purpose. So when she started talking about the willpower thing and the feminine thing, I was like, wow, very intrigued, and so we ended up having about a 45-minute conversation, and she broke down all the areas that I had injured and what they mean, what they relate to in terms of how my consciousness operates. And that's all traditional Chinese medicine stuff. In Chinese medicine, the liver and the gallbladder are ruled by the wood element. And the liver plans and the gallbladder acts. So if you have a liver issue, if you have a gallbladder issue, it's not only about the organ, it's also what the organ represents. And then there's corresponding, joints and body parts and all these things. So she told me that she did this system called Bodytalk, and she recommended that I come have a session with her. So I did, and it was positively mind-blowing. It was everything I'd been looking for without knowing that's what I was looking for. And I don't remember all the things that came up in that first session, but I remember wanting to go back immediately, and I ended up working very closely with her for about a year, and then I ended up getting certified as a Bodytalk practitioner. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Bodytalk system because it is pretty cool, and there's a chart that's probably behind me by now, and it taught me. It really gave me a container. It gave me something to work with, a format. I was always intuitive. I was always, picking up on things, but I had no way of really applying it and helping people with it. Like it's all well and good to be, to be psychic, but I didn't know what I could do with it. It felt empty to just kind of show people, that I could pick up on stuff, or that I knew what song someone was going to put on before they put it on, It didn't feel like it mattered, but Bodytalk I was able to, it taught me how to navigate a person's consciousness. And it did that through the protocol chart and muscle testing. And so you would, grab the person, they'd be lying down, you'd grab their hand, you'd ask them questions. They wouldn't answer, you get the answers from their body, yes or no. You're just asking questions about, what part of this protocol chart are we going to be in? And we just get detail, like as much detail as we possibly could about, why did we need to go to this part of the, section 1, section 2, section 3? What was it in this part of the protocol chart that we needed the information for? And in finding that information, we are also feeding that information into that person's consciousness. So the idea being that we are being held together by something, right? We're not doing it. We don't know what our body is doing consciously. And, we're basically aware of our heart beating. We're aware of, we're aware of pain, but we're not aware of what's happening. All the cells doing all their different functions, all the genetic shifts and changes that are taking place, the production of neurochemicals and hormones and all that. But there is something in us that is aware of this whole process, and that was the whole idea that Bodytalk was working with. It was that we're working with the conductor of this orchestra, and if the conductor isn't able to hear so well one segment, if the horns are off, he's going to have to correct that. But if everything's off, it's kind of like, well, where do you even start? And because because our lives have been so filled, some much more than others, obviously, but so filled with like trauma and injury and pain and bad food and bad water and bad air and living in structures that don't suit our form, and going to school and sitting in a chair and getting bullied or being the bully or whatever it is. There's a lot of disruption, and that disruption needs to be handled in a very specific kind of way, because coming back to like the liver gallbladder thing, if you have a liver issue, but your gallbladder isn't quite ready to handle what the liver is going to dump into it, then you're just shifting the liver issue to a gallbladder issue or to a large intestine issue, right? So you kind of need to respect the body's natural mechanisms, its natural functions, and what it might need in order to actually clear this blockage, this disruption, whether it's a toxic overload of some kind, or you can't digest fat very well, or quite often it does come back to this consciousness thing, right? Like if the liver is about planning and organizing, and you've been put under a tremendous amount of pressure your whole life to like take care of everybody, then you might be kind of over planning, over organizing, or we can get into past life experiences, right? Genetic lineage stuff, where women were given a pretty narrow bandwidth within the household within which they were supposed to operate, and well, men too, just not in a very different way. We all come from people who were very limited. We all come from people who were survivors, and their experiences are informing how our genes get expressed and how our organs function and all that stuff. So Bodytalk gave me the awareness of how to navigate the human form and the human potential and how to work within it. And then in 2015, I was in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I was doing a session, and it just felt so slow, so slow, and just kind of clunky, like the testing and the asking and the having to kind of stick with a protocol, having to stay within this chart. Even though the chart's really cool, I still felt like I was being kind of squeezed, and there's a lot of stuff wanting to come in about the people I was working on, and I couldn't find a way to apply it through the protocol chart, and so I stopped. I stopped muscle testing. I stopped using the Bodytalk protocols, and I just started doing my own thing, and and I've been doing that ever since. So I'll talk a little bit about how I work and what I work with, and then we'll get into some other stuff. And specifically, I want to talk about human design, because I feel like it's one of the most important developments that I've ever come across. And I'll kind of weave in how I work with it. And that's also the most recent thing. So I kind of want to stick to this timeline. The long and short of it is that when you are looking at something, you are not seeing what's there. You're seeing your brain's interpretation of light. and specific frequencies of light. So the light's coming in through your eyes and it's hitting your occipital cortex, and your occipital cortex is creating an image from those light frequencies coming in through your eyes. And then that image is projected through your eyes, and a different part of your brain registers the image that was created or generated and makes minute adjustments to give the illusion of continuity. If our brain had to interpret the light that we see every time we see it as if it was the first time it was seeing it, it couldn't. So there's all these shortcuts, right? We work on memory. We work on imprints, so your mother is the imprint for women, your father's the imprint for men. The first time that you see something, it gets imprinted on your brain, and then that image is essentially the basis for your visual experience of that thing for the rest of your life. And again, like, this is necessary because our brain has a lot to take care of, and if it had to look at everything as if it was seeing it for the first time every time, there wouldn't be any energy left over to do anything else. There's also a part of our brain called the thalamus that is entirely responsible for what frequency of light are we registering. So it's not only that we're using our memory to formulate some kind of image, and that image is then projected, overlaid onto the world in front of us, and that's our visual experience. We're also very limited in terms of all the light that's available for us to interact with consciously. And that's the main task of the thalamus, is to kind of regulate or govern these frequencies of light. And the important thing there is that, if you come in as an infant and you're not consciously on the same visual spectrum as your parents, that's a bad survival strategy. So, we don't see ultraviolet, we don't see X-ray, right? We can develop technology that translates those frequencies of light into something we can interpret, but we're not consciously engaging with it. So, and that's because, our parents didn't, and their parents didn't, and their parents didn't, and, we haven't, it was important for the survival of the species to focus on a very narrow bandwidth, and that's the bandwidth that we still focus on today. It's the same with sound, right? We don't hear a lot of what's there. So we don't see a lot of what's there. We don't hear a lot of what's there. And what we do see and hear is being interpreted by our brain and nervous system and, consciousness in general, because our brain is also a construct in a way. We're not conscious of our brain, but we've seen one, So there's something's coming in. So this is kind of how I work, right? So part of what I'm doing when I'm working with someone is looking at what is their format. What is their brain using to create their visual experience? What is their brain using to create their auditory experience? And that interface of consciousness with our physical form, because that is also going to be like a primary part of it. It's not all happening here. There's, it's all kind of being powered by something beyond, It's not only the limitation of our brain and central nervous system and family lineage and all the traumas and all the things that we've experienced in this life. There's also, just because we're not consciously aware of what else is out there doesn't mean that there aren't things that are consciously aware of us. And just because we're not conscious of the totality of the light spectrum and the totality of the sound spectrum or the auditory spectrum, it doesn't mean there isn't anything there, right? We're just not consciously interfacing with it. But there are things that are consciously interfacing with us, much in the same way of there's parasites and bacteria that very much affect how a person feels and how a person thinks and what a person wants to eat. Animals, insects, right? All very much affected by the presence of certain organisms, and these organisms are specialists. So what I became very aware of as I've been working in this way is that there are a number of things working against us and running interference, because they need our capabilities to generate a world that works for them. And it doesn't matter to them if it works for us or not. It just matters that we stay alive long enough to like sustain them, like any virus or bacteria or parasite. It's just how they work. And there's something coming in that I'm going to have to clear shortly before we can move forward. But maybe I should do that first. So this is how it goes. I'm working with people, and these things come up. I get a sense of, something's in this person's field, and there's three main categories of interference that I tend to find. It's either a person, so we're all walking around with awful boundaries, and projecting expectations onto people, or being on the receiving end of those expectations or those pressures, and we can carry that for our whole life, and the presence of certain people in our field can be very disruptive. Then there's also these, non-physical organisms, say, these like kind of parasites. You can call them entities, because I think that's correct. And then there's these other things that I would call systems. And a system is anything with multiple inputs. So, any of my clients who are watching, they've heard this before, but a sports team is a good example, right? So the New York Yankees have been the Yankees since like the 1880s. Completely different players, owners, coaches, managers, fans, location, right? It's all changed. But the New York Yankees are the New York Yankees, and there's people walking around wearing Yankees, jerseys and ball caps, and they got the names of the players on their back, and they pay money to go to a game, right? So it's energy in. Lots of people putting energy into the New York Yankees, and because there's all those people putting energy in, this is a thing. Now it's a real thing. If people stopped going to Yankees games, then there wouldn't be Yankees. And so, religions are systems, sports teams, military, nations, families, right? We all have the same last name. Families are a bit of a different, it's a bit of a different system, but still the same kind of principle. And yeah, beliefs. If enough people believe something, then it's real. And if no one believes it, then it's no longer real. So those are the three main things that tend to come up, and one of those things is in my field currently running interference on me. So I'm just going to quickly check in. I still do use muscle testing for this. So let me just get a sense of what this is. So we got an entity, and it's So it's an entity that's actually connected to this building. So that's another thing, right? The spaces that we come into are, often, you could say, infested, either because they're built on, land, like it, could be coming from the land itself. It could be from, someone who was in here before. But yeah, there's something working me right now. So at this point, when I'm working on someone, I usually pause, but and get some information. But let's see what I can find quickly here. Yeah, it's affecting my brain and specifically my speech centers. And this is what they do, right? They interfere and they manipulate in order to stop us from doing something that we might really want, or that might be really good for us, or to, heal, repair, regenerate. And okay. So one of the things that I had going on for me as a child was I had a speech impediment. I had a stutter, and it made speaking very difficult, and it elevated my shyness to sky-high levels. And this entity doesn't want me to be talking about that, doesn't want me sharing that for some reason. And something about like what's possible in this life. I got a lot of stories about things that are possible, and this entity doesn't want me to share much of it. All right, so I'll just move it out. And when I'm shifting these entities or systems or people, sometimes it's people who aren't living, so we have to do something with them. I take them somewhere. I don't just want to release them and kind of leave them where they could be picked up by someone else. So we're going to move it to an area of space-time, another dimension, say, where the physics of which exists where it cannot, where its form will not be supported in this area of, I would say space and time, but I don't rightly know what it is we're actually in. So whatever this medium that we're in, we're going to move it out somewhere where it can't maintain its form. And I'm going to drink a little bit of coffee. While I wait for this shift to take place. All right, good. So there's something else that I can do, and this is going to be, so talking about systems, they're not always bad. They're not always working against us. Families, right? A family can be incredibly supportive. Like a military unit, the people who serve in those, they develop a closeness and an intimacy that they can't find anywhere else. And, they might not know how to deal with that, but it's not necessarily a negative thing, and it helped them through like a very tough time potentially. Anyone who is going to be watching this, anyone who's participating in this, presentation, if you want to call it that, is part of a system, and it's a system that I'm, kind of consciously forming right now. And so, it's people watching is energy, energy in, and I'm putting my own energy in, and presenting myself and all this information. And so, so there's a system forming, and anyone who's part of this system, for as long as they are, because we're not going to be holding people in it, but they can visit. That's really the big thing about systems, is that they don't necessarily want to let you go, so because you're, food. A lot of people grow up in a certain way. They don't want to live that way. They try and move away from where they were born or from the religion that they were raised in, and it creates conflict. There's disappointment and judgment and concern and like all this stuff, and that's not the people, that's the system working through those people, right? And their own fear of being disconnected, their astonishment that you would want to be disconnected from it. What's really interesting in this time is that all these systems that are representing these, institutions everyone's being disconnected. All the authority that used to be in, the medical system, the educational system, the political system, the banking system, all that, we're really not connected to it in the way that we used to be. And I'm gonna talk to that and why that's important in just a moment. But I want to do something. So for everyone who's joining in this broadcast and who's connecting, in this system for as long as they are, there's some kind of benefit, that you can all get from it. And what I'm really connecting to is, like authority. The authority via the individuation process. So if the structures that represented authority in our world are collapsing, which they are, or they've been hollowed out anyway, there's still power there. They can still do stuff, but it's not. They're obviously not what they used to be. Then it's up to us as individuals to understand ourselves and what we are separate from these institutions. And one of the ways that I do this with my clients is called an individuation process. So, and I should just say, when I'm working on people, I'm not deciding what they need, right? I'm listening. Bodytalk, again, very cool in that sense, where you're connecting with the part of the body that knows what it is when it's whole and is constantly trying to get there. And you're asking it kind of what it's working on, and then you're sort of helping it. You're sort of giving it details of what it might be missing, why it can't quite get the access to the, to the ileocecal valve, that there's some kind of disruption there that's upsetting the, environment, between the, the alkaline environment of the small intestine and the acidic environment of the large intestine, and why it can't get regulated, because that valve isn't operating properly. But the body might not be aware of what's going on there because it's something else, right? It's something that's not physically part of that structure. So the body's awareness of it is pretty limited, right? If we're talking about, some kind of parasite, some kind of entity, some kind of system, some kind of disruption caused by family lineage, or a past life experience, or just planetary transits. So I would never do this unless I was told explicitly that this is what was necessary. And so, and we're rolling, like this feels good. So there's anyone who connects to this system through this broadcast is going to get an individuation process. That's where we're going to start. And individuating is based on your heart. Your heart is not only an organ, it's also it's an endocrine as well, but it's also a brain. It's a separate nervous system. We have three brains: the head, the heart, and the gut. You could be brain dead, but as long as there's oxygen coming into your body, your heart still beats and your gut still digests, and they both still produce their particular brand of neurochemicals and hormones. And the heart, from what I understand, this may not be correct, but from what I understand, the heart is the first organ to form. It kind of makes sense when you think about it, that the cardiac cells are the first cells to differentiate from the stem cells, because the blood would have to flow. So the heart forms first, and then it starts pumping blood to all the other parts of the body so that they can form. And because of that, the heart is sending a lot of information. It's not only sending blood and oxygen and nutrient to all the cells as they're differentiating. It's the heartbeat, the heart frequency, and the heart's awareness as a brain that is informing the sort of differentiation of all the different cells and getting them in the right places, and turning them on at the right time. And so when we're talking about an individuation process and it being based in a person's heart, like their heart brain, it's really like the awareness of what you are, the awareness of what your potential is, of what you were before you came into the world, right? When you were protected in your mother's womb, and you were forming, and you were just kind of pure potential, right? You were the wave, not the particle yet. It's the heart's awareness that had you form into what you are. And so when we go into the individuation process and we do it through the heart's awareness, it's about clearing, as much of these influences as possible, all the things we identify with and all the things we identify as, if they're not useful. Sometimes they're useful. We don't need to get rid of everything all at once. But by doing this individuation process, it's really effective at clearing a lot of this stuff away, so that you can get to the core, the core of what you are. And it's really about making decisions, making decisions from that heart brain, or allowing the decisions to be made from that awareness of what you are. Our brain does a lot, our mind does a lot, but they're not all that good at decision making. That needs to kind of come from a different spot. So I'm just setting up this system where everyone who comes in is going to get an individuation process. And we're going to do more on that too. I'm just going to let this form. Drink a bit more coffee. Yeah, and so what I'm getting here as well is that we need to anchor this process into something. So like there needs to be some kind of stability, some kind of foundation, you know, for all your hearts to be working off of. And we're actually going to do that through what you would call an axial tonal pathway. So talking about frequencies of sound and light and how they inform our sense of things. Obviously, most of it's going to be coming from our sun, but there's a lot of points of light out there. And these stars, you know, they're not only putting out light, they're also putting out sound. If sound traveled through space, we'd hear the sun, and it'd be incredibly loud. But because it's a vacuum, we don't get the sound, and that's good because we wouldn't be able to, you know, live on this planet because we're too close. You know, the sound would be deafening. But yeah, there's sound and light frequencies that are going to be very helpful, and it's also because we're working with an individuation process, we're not going to anchor this into just one particular spot. So everyone's going to need their own axial tonal pathway. Everyone's going to need a direct connection to a star to get that particular sound and light frequency that they might need. And you know, some people might need the same one, you know, but it'll still be their own individual experience, their own individual connection, their own anchor in this individuation process. Yeah, so I'm just setting this up so that when people connect, there is an awareness built into the system of what pathway is going to serve them best in terms of this individuation process. Yeah, and what's interesting too is there seems to be a need for some hydration. So part of what's going to happen when people connect to the system is there's going to be a hydration protocol. So people getting saturated, right? All the cells getting nice and plump. Also cooling things down, you know, keeping things at a good temperature. I'm actually going to drink a bit of water here on that. And if you all at home want to drink some water, now would be a good time. Yeah, and there's also something coming up here about pets. So yeah, those of you who have animals around you, they're going to be getting some benefit here, and they're also going to be contributing their energy to this system. And there's something very special about the bond between humans and mammals, you know, dogs and cats. I mean, you can, you know, obviously you can form a connection with pretty much anything, depending on what your design is, but specifically looking at like mammals and the relationships they have, horses also, and just like how they move energy for us, and how they, you know, they're working with us, and they're really strong allies. And so we're going to bring, you know, anyone who comes in who has an animal with them, that animal is going to be a part of this process as well. And they're going to get it's not like the individuation, that's not really important for them, but the hydration most definitely. And yeah, just whatever their hearts might need, you know, whatever information they might need to send. And, you know, in terms of dogs and cats and that, like and horses, it's about what's radiating kind of out of them. It's not about their awareness of themselves as much as their impact on the environment. All right. Okay, good. So that's all clear. Now we can move forward. I'm going to talk a little bit about human design, and there's going to be a body graph popping up. This is my body graph, so you all know, those of you who have already been exposed to human design, now you know what I am and how I operate. It's something I would recommend for everybody. I don't tend to recommend everybody do one thing. And that it is actually kind of antithetical to what human design is, because it's very much a individual experience. But I think in terms of the time that we're in and where we're going, it is very important to know what your design is. They say the map is not the territory. So, when you're looking at your body graph, or, my body graph, I don't know what side it's on, this one, you're not seeing me, just like when you look at your body graph, you're not seeing you, but you are seeing a fairly effective tool at deciphering what your path in this life looks like, and how to know when you're veering off course. I came into human design, I started with my experiment in 2019, 2020. It's been about 4 years. And I actually came across it for the first time in 2011, when I was really into Bodytalk at that time. And a person who I knew started to tell me about it, and my sense of it at the time was, I don't need another old white guy telling me how to live. I already had one of those. The founder of the Bodytalk system was a very arrogant and domineering figure, and was very rigid in his beliefs about how you're supposed to live. And I really didn't, and I can respect what he did, because Bodytalk worked, it was effective, it taught me a lot, but I didn't care for him. I didn't want another one, so I was like, whatever, I don't need that. And then it was through a podcast, actually, in late 2018, early 2019, that I was reintroduced to the human design system, and I listened to the podcast, and listened to the woman talking about it, and then I got a session with her, and as did my wife, and we had just had our child, so that was just the timing of it, being able to raise a child, being able to kind of see what they are, and to allow them to sort of be that, not like, it's not about forcing anything on anyone, but just having the awareness of what might work, and why this behavior might be coming up at this time, and how it might be just fine, it might be just fine, might be exactly what they are and what they need, and how you, with your design, need to respond to that. So the cool thing about human design is that it introduces the idea, the concept, that we are 9-centered beings. So the 7 chakra centers were what our human ancestors were until the discovery of Uranus in 1781. And with the discovery of Uranus in 1781, there was a mutation to the human form. And rather than the 7 energetic centers, we started coming in with 9. It wasn't all at once. It's not like everyone born after 1781 had 9 centers, but primarily. And there's a number of distinctions between the 7-centered and the 9-centered being. And it really makes sense when you look at things historically, like how things have gone, that we're different. We know it, we can feel the difference from our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents. Our great-grandparents, they would have grown up in a world that was still pretty dominated by a 7-centered, not the 7-centered beings, but the 7-centered philosophies. So 7-centered beings were on the planet, for 200,000 years, right? The hominids who were on the planet before the 7-centered beings, before modern Homo sapiens evolved or developed, they were 5-centered beings, and that's the same as mammals. So Neanderthals and the other hominids that were around before modern Homo sapiens, they were 5-centered beings, and the big difference in that is that they didn't have they didn't have a third eye. They didn't have an ajna. It's the ajna center in the human design system. And the ajna is what provides introspection. It's an awareness center, and it's what gives us our mental capacities, which is a mixed blessing. It's really cool, that I can sit here with all this technology and deliver this message to a bunch of people who I will probably never meet. But and that's what our mind does, and it's a very cool thing. It's a very good tool. But being mind dominated, pardon me, comes with some issues, comes with some problems. So the five-centered beings who were here before, they were very animalistic and not necessarily introspective. And you see that, in that, maybe, yeah, like they made tools, like they were smart, right? They had huge brains. And they made tools, and they made art and these kind of things. But it was all very practical, and it was all about survival, I mean, the art, well, we don't necessarily even know, maybe there was art, maybe there was burials. It's kind of contentious, but what's pretty clear is that their use of language was probably pretty minimal. They didn't have the hardware to articulate. And so anyway, seven-centered beings come in, however long ago, and immediately they dominate. Because the seven-centered story is about domination, it's about hierarchy, and it's about survival, because that was still a very real thing, but survival within like a hierarchical dominant system, which obviously is come to its end, right? There's a lot of discussion these days, and it's very much at exactly the right time. A lot of discussion about dominance hierarchies, and are they still useful? And obviously they're not, right? So they're being kind of overthrown. So yeah, the seven-centered beings, they were dominant on the planet for a very long time, at least 75,000 years. And because I think that's roughly when they really became dominant. They may have been around for 100,000 years before that, but they were sharing space, right? Sharing space with the other hominids. And there was a choke point about 74,000 years ago. There was a volcanic eruption that wiped out almost all the human life on this planet. The current consensus is that we went down to about 2,000 breeding pairs. So yeah, we're all the descendants of those 4,000 humans. So anyway, around that time became a seven-centered human-dominated world, and it lasted for a very long time. And the religions that had the seven-centered structures were developed at that time. The ancient Egyptians had seven chakras. The Hindus had seven chakras. It was a very widely distributed, very long-lasting way of seeing the human form in its energetic form. The seven-centered beings lived their lifespan wasn't as long, right? So the seven-centered beings were Saturnian. They were, it takes Saturn 28 years to do a full cycle of the zodiac. So their lifespan was roughly 28 years long. So, the midlife, it's not to say, I mean, people obviously live longer than 28 years, but on average, that was about it. And after 28, whatever you got was kind of gravy. And it's really about like the midlife. So their midlife was 14, right? Half a Saturnian cycle. By 14, you were going to be getting married, having children, running your own, working your own land, or like apprenticing in a craft of some kind. Your life had started by the age of 14, and if you didn't have something going by the time you were 21, right, 3/4 through, it was pretty much too late. to really get anything started. And as a result, like women were referred to as spinsters, right? When they were like 24, they were already past the point where you could marry, by and large. As nine-centered beings, our lifespan is measured by Uranus. Uranus is a 84-year cycle. So our midlife is, our early 40s, mid 40s. And our lifespan is roughly 84 years. And so we are not only not here to exist in a world that is formed around dominance and hierarchy, we're also not here to rush, right? We got time. And it's actually better because we're going to live, and this is a real problem, right? Older people not really knowing what to do, like how to be, what to do with themselves past a certain point. And it's because we rush. We don't take our time. We don't allow ourselves to fully grow and fully develop before we launch ourselves into a career or into a marriage. And then, things kind of fall apart, or our health falls apart. Human design, it's about aura. And the nine-centered being has a different aura than the seven-centered beings had. And there's overlap for sure, but yeah, we're here for this time. Our auras work together based on the sort of dominance of the nine-centered being, because there's no more seven-centered beings left. And there's something coming in that I'm going to have to clear before I can move on. And this tends to happen. Like, I tend to wander when something kind of comes in. I kind of lose my train of thought a little bit. So there's a person who has come into the field that I'm going to have to clear before I can get to my point. It's not someone watching, but it is someone who I know. Yeah. All right. I won't spend a lot of time getting details. I'll just move them out. Okay. All right, cool. So when I talk about aura in the context of human design, I'm talking about how we interact. So most of the world, they are what are called generators, and there's and that's what I am. On a body graph, if you look at what's called the sacral center, if you have a sacral center defined, that is what it means to be a generator, meaning if that sacral center is colored in. A generator they have an aura, or we have an aura, and that's 66% of the population. We have an aura that is open and that is enveloping and that is warm, and we are here to respond. So we're not here to initiate, right? Talking about rushing. There's all this pressure that's put on us when we're young that we have to work. We got to work. And generators, we are here to work, but we're here to work at what we enjoy. We're here to do what we like doing. And, it's hard. It's hard to not do. There's people who are definitely very good at it, but there's all this pressure, all these like belief systems about the need to sacrifice and compromise, and just you got to go out and you got to work and you got to work hard. And as a generator, there isn't any person that does well with that. There's some who can do it better than others. Their design allows them to kind of just do what needs doing, and they can do that, and it's fine. But that's certainly not everyone. So generators, we're here to do what we like. We're here to work, and to work hard to use all the energy, because the sacral center has a lot of energy. And we're here to use our sacral energy to build and to produce and to do things, because there's that sexual energy that's there too. So reproduction, production, it's all the same stuff. there's other forms that don't have a defined sacral center, and these are projectors, manifestors, and reflectors, and they make up, all together, they make up 33% of the Earth population. Projectors make up 20%, manifestors make up about 9%, and reflectors make up about 1%. And they all have open sacral centers, which means they're non-energetic beings. They don't have their own energy. So they have to interact with generators, right? So manifestors, for example, used to be royalty. I have no doubt that Alexander was a manifestor, that, probably like Napoleon was a manifestor. I know for a fact that Adolf Hitler was a manifestor, because we have his human design. A manifestor needs generators, right? A leader needs followers, so manifestors make it happen. Their energy initiates, and they are here to inform. Whereas a generator is here to respond, and not to wait, right? Projectors are also here to wait, but their waiting is a bit of a different thing, and their energy is different. So a manifestor's aura is like repellent. Their aura pushes, whereas a generator aura kind of allows things to come in. Manifestors aren't here to be impacted by others, so their field pushes other people's energy away. They're here to make the impact. They're not here to be impacted. The projector, their aura penetrates. So a projector is here to guide, and that's the main difference between the 9-centered and the 7-centered aura. That with a 9-centered being, you had the development of projectors, which didn't exist prior to 1781. Projectors are here to guide. They are going to be very helpful in the coming years as the authority and the external authority that we've all grown up under, and their structures and the institutions all kind of get hollowed out and don't have the same kind of power or influence that they used to have. We will start to rely on the guidance of projectors. And projectors can guide because they are getting saturated with our energy. A projector goes in, right? The generator aura is open, so we just absorb. A projector is focused, and it goes right in, and it goes in specifically to the G center, which is the diamond-shaped center in the center of the body graph. If it's defined, it will be yellow. If it's not, it will be white, like mine. I don't have a defined G center. I'll talk about definition and what it means in just a moment. But basically, the G center is about direction, and it's about identity. So if you have an open G center, you have no definition there, then your sense of direction and your identity is going to be open. It's not going to be fixed. You will be someone like myself who has lived in a number of different places. You will be someone who, you go to the gym, you go to a cafe, you go to a restaurant, you're at home. It's like you're going to be kind of different in each of those places. Your preferences are going to be much more flexible. You're going to be more agreeable in this life with an open G center. With a defined G center, things are just more fixed. You have your preferences, you know what you like, it doesn't really change. Neither are better or worse, and both have their own challenges. Projector aura goes into the G center. They connect with your sense of your guidance, your sense of direction, your sense of identity, and from that awareness, they can then offer you guidance. A projector's awareness of themselves is never going to be as strong as their awareness of the other. Projectors aren't here to know themselves, they're here to be guides. So they don't need to concern themselves with their own self-awareness. Generators are here to know themselves. A generator will know themselves much better than a projector knows themselves. But a projector will know the generator better than the generator will know the projector, if that all makes sense. So human design is combination of the I Ching, which is an ancient Chinese text of divination, And the I Ching is comprised of 64 hexagrams, 64 six-line patterns of broken and solid lines. In the human design body graph, each of these hexagrams are what's called a gate. And the gates correlate to different sections of the zodiac. So where your planets are going to activate different gates, and different gates are going to be in different centers. And if you have opposing gates, if you have like one gate activated in the throat and then another gate activated in the G center, then you're going to have those two centers are going to be defined. You need to have that kind of connection. You can have a gate it's called a hanging gate, where a planet is activating a gate in one of the centers, but there isn't that oppositional energy, so it can't connect and it can't define. It can't be a fixed energy. So taking the interpretation of the 64 hexagrams of the I Ching and applying it through the sort of lens of human design is how we get the information, right? So just for example, I have the 2343 or the 4323. So there's a central channel between the third eye, the ajna, and the throat, and this is the genius to freak channel, right? It's basically like people with the 4323 are going to have ideas, and they're going to communicate those ideas in ways that are kind of unique. It's also like a channel. It's like a channel of channeling, you know. So, you know, I haven't prepared, you know, you may be surprised to hear I haven't prepared anything. I just came in, I had a rough idea of what I was going to do, and I sit and I talk, and this is how I work also when I'm working with people. You know, I don't know what's going to come up, but it just comes in. And that's basically what that 4323 does. It just means that there's going to be a constant kind of flow of information, and people with that particular channel, you know, it might be. It's not to say that what they're saying is wrong. They might not be saying it to the right people, right? It might be the wrong time. There's still, like, just because you have it doesn't mean it's going to be perfect. There's still going to be, you know, things that you're going to have to understand about yourself, and using the rest of your body graph to know when to use these, you know, these gifts that you've been given, you know, these things that are consistently there. And that brings us to strategy, and that brings us to authority. So, like I said, you know, the strategy of the manifestor is to inform, and the strategy of the generator and the projector is to wait. A generator waits to respond, and a projector waits for the invitation, right? So it's a bit different. That's strategy. So if you're a generator or a projector, it's good for you to wait and to not get impatient and not rush into things. It works better that way. The authority is literally how you make decisions. So there's lots of different kinds of authorities in the human design body graph. There's sacral authority, there's emotional authority, splenic authority, you know, lots of different things. The authority is basically what you use to say yes or no to. So I have emotional authority. My solar plexus center is defined. It makes me an emotional being. It means that, and you know, roughly 50% of the population has this, right? Which also means that roughly half the population doesn't. So the world is kind of divided. There's this binary of emotional beings and non-emotional beings. And the thing about design, what it also shows is where we are open, we can be conditioned. So if I, as an emotional being, am in the room with someone who is not, then they're going to be conditioned by the emotional state that I am in. And as a non-emotional being, they're not only going to feel, you know, they're not only going to be conditioned by my emotional state, they're going to amplify it and maybe redirect it in a certain way. So for emotional beings, it's really good to be in the mood, because if you're not in the mood, you're gonna bring a pretty toxic energy into that environment. You're gonna impact people in a way that's not okay for them. You know, it's okay for you because emotional beings kind of need some drama. So if we can get some from, you know, a non-emotional being, right, we can condition them, stimulate them to get activated, to get into an argument, to get passionate, with us about something. Like that works for us, but it doesn't work for them very well. So again, knowing when to get involved, knowing when to hold back, knowing when you're on your emotional wave, when you're up, when you're down. Having emotional authority means that you don't make decisions when you're up or down, because the emotional wave that you're experiencing might have nothing to do with what's actually happening in front of you. Someone asks you a question, you're in a certain mood, you're going to say yes or no, and that might not be correct. So all generators are here to wait. All projectors are here to wait. Emotional generators and projectors specifically are here to wait and wait for that emotional clarity. And it's only with that clarity that you can be sure, you're going to say yes or no to something. I'll give you an example. I walked into this apothecary back in Ashland, where I was living, and Ashland, Oregon. And I thought, my immediate sense was, wow, this is kind of a cool place, and they had practitioners working out of there. And I thought, it might be interesting to do some, human design readings out of this place, like not doing my full session, but just human design. And in the past, I would have just acted on that. I would have just been like, okay, who do I have to talk to? Let's set it up. But I waited like 2 weeks. And then I reached out, and I waited until I was calm, because I was excited. I could feel the opportunity. I knew this was going to be good. And but I waited until I didn't feel that, And the cool thing about being an emotional being, like, it kind of sucks that we all have to wait. But the cool thing about it is that it waits for us too. So if it's really supposed to be something that we're supposed to interface with, if it's truly for us to say yes to, it will still be there. It's not going to go anywhere. And, and if there's like a time crunch or there's pressure to get something done quickly, it's probably not for us, probably not for you if you are an emotional being. So I waited until I was calm and centered, and then I reached out and I connected with the owner. She responded, said, yeah, let's set something up. I waited again another 2 weeks, and then I reached out to her again. I said, thank you for your patience. I'm available on this day. What do you think? She got back to me again. I didn't get back to her right away. I didn't wait 2 weeks this time. I didn't have to, because I was already pretty clear on what I was doing, and the sort of emotional intensity had diminished. But anyway, yeah. So that's kind of how it's supposed to work. It really giving yourself permission to wait and to not respond to pressure, to not act on the emotional intensity of that moment. If you really want to experiment with that as an emotional, you have to get your human design done first. But there's a lot of websites out there. mybodygraph.com is a good one. Human archetypes, which is the chart that I have up here, is also a very good one. Human archetypes is actually cool because it gives you some more information about diet and like environment and all these different things, which I won't get into right now. But outside of just knowing yourself and understanding about why things go how they go, and why things haven't gone how they haven't gone, and that there's a strategy, and there's an authority, and that there's a design, and that you have preferences, and those preferences are real and consistent and will not change. Other things will change, but there's things about you that are core, and they are going to be there your whole life. Understanding that about ourselves, and I've never come across anything so accurate. I've been in, numerology, astrology, like, the I Ching, tarot, all the any divination I've done. Nothing. What's that? The Myers-Briggs personality, the Enneagram, like I've done it all. I've never found anything so accurate. And the story of how human design came in is pretty wild, and I don't get it's like the right time for me to share that, but there is a prophecy associated with it, and it's a very easily falsifiable prophecy because it's a prophecy for this time, the time that we find ourselves in. The guy who got human design into the world, he got it in 1987, and he started speaking publicly about it in the mid-90s, early to mid-90s. And he was talking about this time. He died in 2011, right around the time I first heard about it, actually. But yeah, so he was talking about this time in the 90s, and he was talking about, fertility. He was talking about that fertility would be an issue, right? That people wouldn't be having children, that human sexuality would be undergoing some kind of change, that it would be sort of, I don't know, disordered's not the right word, but neither is revolution, because it's neither of those things. It's just things are different. Human sexuality is different. Human fertility is different. He was talking about this, and it's all necessary. It's all part of this program, this background energy that's influencing us to do what it needs, because we're all a part of this program. Okay. So part of the human design body graph is what's called the incarnation cross. My incarnation cross is the cross of explanation. So again, I have the 4323, so I have a lot of things to say, and I'm born on the cross of explanation, so I have a lot of things to say. So I talk a lot. And ironically, I had a stutter, right? I had a speech impediment. And that happens to a lot of people who are born on this cross or who have this channel. They'll have a hard time talking. They'll have a hard time getting their point across, because people don't necessarily want to hear it. You don't want to hear your kid, like back in the day where children weren't expected to really say much to the authority. You'd be heavily conditioned to, keep your mouth shut. So even if what you were saying was correct or true, is coming out of the mouth of a child, then wouldn't be respected. There's individual incarnation crosses. There's lots and lots of them. I don't remember the exact number, but it's definitely over 100. There's also incarnation crosses that last for many years, 400 plus years. And we are coming to the end of our 400-year cycle. Our cycle started in 1615. It was the cross of planning, keeping in mind that this started with the 7-centered beings, right? The 9-centered beings came in about halfway through. The cross of planning is literally about the building of institutions to support population growth and the movement of populations, the mixing of genetic material, all the things that have been the focus of the past 400 years are all cross of planning. So there's individuals who have the cross of planning, and they are people who are going to fit in very well to the institutional structure, or they would have until the institutional structure started to degrade. Again, roughly, 2011, with Ra's death and just everything that sort of happened since then. So we're coming to the end of the cross of planning. All the structures that were built up during that time are being shut down, and there's a new background energy coming in. It's called the cross of the sleeping phoenix. The sleeping phoenix is about individuality. So cross of planning was about the collective. Well, it was tribal, right? So it was about the family primarily. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, right? Ironically, that was said around the time where we came into the final lap of this cycle, of this 400-year cycle, in 1961, and Sleeping Phoenix. It's about individuality, and it's about mutation. The full effects of it won't be. So we come to the end of the cross of planning in 2027. The full effects of the Sleeping Phoenix won't be felt for probably about 100 years. after that point, because there will be a lot of people who are born before 2027 carrying the energy of the cross planning. But it will be very different, and we can already see that. Things are very different, and they're not going to be going back. The destabilization that we are experiencing is going to increase and get amplified, and the structures, the structures that were formed over the past 400 years, democracy, global empires, multinational corporations, a global banking structure. All these, they're not going to go away, but it's not going to be the same. They're not going to have the same influence, and they can't have the same influence because the energy won't be there for them to have that influence. It's going to be up to us. We're going to be free, and we're going to find out what freedom means. And if you aren't capable of knowing yourself and making decisions based on that awareness, and when I'm talking about yourself, I don't mean your thoughts or the things that you identify with. I'm talking about your aura, like how you operate, because it's like our physical form, like I said at the very beginning, it's an interpretation. It's an interpretation of light and sound by our brain and our consciousness. So it doesn't mean much. And it's already done, right? By the time you hear or see something, it's already passed. It takes about a half a second to render a visual image. But our body, and that's, I should clarify, with human design we have two columns. We have the red column and the black column, and the red column is design, and the black column is personality. The idea here is that your design is your body, and it's primarily unconscious, and the personality is your personality. It's like your spirit in a certain way, or your consciousness, and the body dies, but the spirit lives on. The body is formed first, so your design side is the planetary positions at 6 months development. That's basically when your vehicle was ready. And then the black side, the personality side, is the planetary activations at the time of your birth. And that's when your personality inhabited your vehicle. Because we don't see something until it's already past us, and we don't hear something, because we're always about a half second behind. Again, it's like making decisions with our mind, with our awareness. Sometimes that's fine, but it's not going to be, our body is going to be much more consistent. And for anyone who's ever, had an experience with like a wild animal, like I was doing this hike. I was on this mountaintop, and I walked into this clearing. This is many years ago. Walked into this clearing, and I felt it. It's like, oh, there's something else here. It felt like I was going to be ambushed. Like there was a literal feeling of an ambush. And so I stopped and I looked around, and I saw there was a cave, and then I looked around a bit more, and I saw this bear. And before I even registered what I was doing, I was running. Like I didn't make that decision. My body just took me away from there. Similar experience, I was again on this hike, and I'm walking and I'm like fiddling with my phone. I have my earbuds in. I'm going to put some music on, and my body just stops. Like I put my foot down and I don't move forward, and I look around and there's a snake like right in front of me, and I didn't see it. I didn't see it, but my body responded to it. Our body starts moving before we decide what we're going to do. And that's a verifiable statement. Lots of science, to back that up. So the idea with human design is that the strategy and the authority is on the level of form. It's on the level of our body. It's not on the level of our mind or our conscious awareness. And the more we can let our body, our design make the decisions using strategy and using authority, waiting for things to come, and then, if you're an emotional being, waiting till you have emotional clarity. If you're a, sacral being, just waiting for that, like, or right? The sacral authority is very verbal. Splenic authority is very much about the future. That story I told about getting hit by that car, but hearing that conversation in my head before it happened, I have a defined spleen, in my body graph. So I get periodic splenic authority. It's not my authority. It's not what I rely on for making decisions because I'm an emotional being, but it will protect me. It will keep me safe. And if you have splenic authority, it's gonna inform you, when you're about to get into something that maybe you don't want to, or it's going to potentially be a little hairy. As things move forward, and as we move into 2027, and the continued kind of dissolving of all our structures, the things that used to tell us what to do and what to think and how to feel are not going to do that anymore, or it's not going to be enforced. It will be much more of a choice. And there will be people who will make that choice to stick with the institutions and everything the institution demands, because they're going to want, they're going to want, or they're ignorant, of what they're capable of, right? They're going to want to have that authority. They're going to want to have that decision making being done by something external, right? They're going to want that external authority for whatever reason. And then there's going to be other folks like myself. There's not everyone in human design is going to want to do that, even if they currently think that they would. But it's not only about human design. It's just one avenue, and it's the one that I found, and it's the one that I feel is the most effective. It's going to be up to us and our strategy and our authority to guide us through this world. And it's going to be interesting. It's going to be intense. And having some awareness of what we can rely on when it comes to our own selves and our own decision-making capabilities is going to be essential. So, human design. I think that's enough on that. The way that I use human design when I'm working on people is just that. It's like I look at a person's design, and it gives me a really good sense of what they are and how they might be conditioned, where they're open, where they're more susceptible to being conditioned by, again, someone with, definition in that area. So, for example, a lot of people, they have an open heart, right? 66% of the population they aren't defined in their heart center. It's open. People who have an open heart center are going to be they're going to experience more pressure to prove themselves. They're going to be running around trying to show how much value they have, right? Proving their worth. It's very important to a person with an open heart center to prove their worth, but it's like the worst thing because they don't actually have to. They're going to think they have to, right? Their mind is going to give them all kinds of reasons as to why they need to show their worth, prove their worth. But that's not what they're here for. They're not here. People with open hearts aren't here to prove anything, and that's 66% of the population. People with open heads, such as myself, my head's completely open. I don't have any activation there. 70% of the population have an open head center. They're going to think about things that don't matter. They're going to feel a tremendous amount of pressure to figure it out. I stopped trying to figure things out a long time ago, and it's much better. It's much better because I never was really good at it. It works much better for me to just be like, my mind's going. It's there's pressure, but it's like I'm not going to be paying attention. And I'm not perfect at this at all. But in terms of making decisions, I don't pay attention to that. I can indulge in that, and I can get very emotional based on what my head is doing. But at least I have awareness now that it's not mine. I can check in and see what's there and work on clearing it. So when I'm working with someone, I'm looking at where they're open, what they could be thinking or feeling about themselves that is just not true, and that they don't really need. And then that kind of clears a lot of stuff out, and then it's like, well, what are they then? What is like the core thing working? How does their aura operate? What's their incarnation cross? What's their dietary strategy? The dietary strategy thing is really interesting because it's not about what you eat, it's the style in which you eat it. So like my dietary strategy is high sound. So my digestive process is going to be improved by the presence of music, or like a lot of activity. Like for me, restaurants are really good. The problem with eating in public is that you're also, you're being conditioned, right? And there's all kinds of things that you might be affected by. But anyway, so I play music when I eat, and I always have. I've always had music going since I was a child. And that's kind of the cool thing about human design, is that it all makes sense. It's not surprising. When I found out that my dietary strategy was high sound, I was like, well, of course. Like, of course it is. I mean, I always have music playing. So I'll look at all these things, and, it's very helpful. It's very helpful to inform, even though I'm not a manifester, to inform people through the human design system. And then, I do my thing. I see what's, what might be conditioned, what might be working in a weird way, and, clear it, work with it, do whatever. And that's about the long and short of it. Probably good for now. So, we good? Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for paying attention and being here and being part of this broadcast. I really do appreciate it, and I hope that you get benefit from what I've set up for all of you. And there are links to my website and anything. If you have any questions or want to do a phone call and get a bit more information about how I work, I'm always available. So, all right. Thank you very much.